Hey everyone, Wolf of 1918 here, and today we're going to be talking about something that is more often associated with the British and the Americans rather than the Germans. Yet this piece of field equipment still helped play a role in German success in 1918 and is most commonly seen on German reenactors today rather than the more typical jackboots. I am of course talking about what most English speakers call puttees, but in German they were called Gamaschen. So before I get into how to put them on and the proper way to wear them, I'm going to be talking about the history of the Gamaschen and why the Germans ended up using them in 1917, 1918 rather than just starting the war with them. If you want to just go to the tutorial and you don't really care about the history, you can go ahead and skip to this timestamp up here, which should be floating around in a text format, and just go ahead and skip there and you'll bypass all the history stuff. If you're interested in the history, stick around because this is some pretty interesting information and really shows the way that the German army was configured and some of the downsides to the way the German army was set up at the start of the First World War. Now, the typical footwear for the German soldier at the start of the war was the 1866 model Marschentiefel, which were basically what we call jackboots. They went up just below the knee, or just right around the calf. They went right around to the calf, and they were made of leather. These boots had amazing upsides for their ankle support and for their ability to keep water out of the shoe and keeping dirt out of the shoe when you're marching, whereas the typical marching boots of the British and Americans required the puttees to properly wear without getting stuff in them, and even that wasn't guaranteed due to the mere nature of the puttees being very differential based on who was actually wrapping them and the skill of the person doing it, skill of the soldier. The downside was that each German soldier was also issued a pair of low boots, which were generally used for administrative duties or when they were on leave and just sort of worn around when they weren't in combat or marching. Now, this downside was that Germany required on imports for their leather. They didn't really make a lot of leather themselves, so an army that requires imports for their leather production is issuing troops 2 pairs of boots made differently from each other to each soldier, which means that because boots didn't have a very long shelf life in the trenches, I believe the number I was given was around 6 months. You're talking about having to issue people new pairs of boots every 6 months, and not just 1 pair, but 2 pairs. On top of that, if they decided not to make the low boots, the jack boots were actually more expensive and took more leather to make than the low boots themselves. So this led to around 1916, the Marschentiefel started to wane in production, and low boots were more common in the trenches. To get around this, it was common to see some soldiers making their own Gamaschen, privately purchasing it, or stealing it off of British soldiers, although the lattermost of these was the least common, as by the time that they'd get it off a dead British soldier, it was already pretty ripped up, and German soldiers would rather have new ones rather than the old used ones. There isn't a lot of photographic evidence to support that it was common and widespread. So Gamaschen started to get issued to troops right around late 1916, early 1917. It wasn't super common to see until the Marschentiefel stopped being produced, and there isn't an exact date on it, but around mid-1917 is when puttees with the Germans start to become more commonly seen in photographs. So it's easy to assume that based on the 6-month time period that the jackboots actually lasted, we can take into account that the Marschentiefel stopped being produced around early 1917, late 1916. And this is why in 1918, the most common footwear you see German soldiers using is the low boots with the Gamaschen wrapped around their legs. Now, Gamaschen wasn't perfect. It was better than jackboots in some way. And you can actually get a lot more information from Brandon F's video on it that he did. He did an excellent job looking at it. You'll probably be able to click it in the card up here and in the description below. And he lists a lot of the benefits the puttees actually gave to British soldiers versus just using jackboots. One of the things he mentions is that it stopped things from falling into the shoe if they were done properly. And while that is true, there were workarounds for the jackboots as well, as straps used for stabilizing them while marching could also then be repurposed to tighten up the tops of the jackboots so that nothing could fall down them. Another problem with Gamaschen, besides the inconsistency depending on the soldier, the wearer of them, was that it wasn't as waterproof as having a pair of Marschentiefel. This is why trench foot was almost uniquely British. And although Germans suffered it in their trenches, it wasn't as bad as with the British. Now, of course, this is partially due to where the British trenches were and how poorly they were built versus the Germans having more reinforced trenches with better drainage systems, and they were situated on a better water table. Still, The jack boots versus the low boots did play a role in that differential of how bad they suffered from trench foot. So there are some benefits to the Marschentiefel versus the negatives, but when you're a nation that requires leather imports to, supply your army, and you're already making 2 pairs of boots per soldier and issuing them to them instead of just keeping it on the cheaper side and just having 1 boot, you're asking for trouble. And it would have been better for Germany to start the war with low boots and Gamaschen. Although whether or not this would have affected Germany in any large way or helped them win the war is debatable. And in my opinion, I doubt that it played a part at all. The Germans made a way around all these different supply problems. They actually developed a new kind of explosive for their artillery shells when the main type of explosive that they were getting in for their artillery was cut off due to the blockade. They just created a new type that was also used as a substitute fertilizer. So the Germans were very crafty, and they were able to figure out ways around the blockade. The one thing that they couldn't was, of course, food, and that's why the German military fell apart later in the war and why the home front collapsed, was due to the food part of the blockade, which was the one part of the blockade that was kind of illegal. So, yeah, but I digress. That's getting off the subject. So now that you kind of know the history of the Gamaschen, why the German soldiers started using them, and why they kind of ditched the Marschentiefel that they had at the beginning of the war, now we can get into how to properly wear them, how to put them on, and all that. And this is a pain in the butt. I personally don't like Gamaschen. I think that they're super hard to put on, and they don't really last too long on the person. Granted, that's mainly because I'm not too good at putting them on. But I'm going to show you basic tutorial. You can also watch Brandon F's tutorial, which is very, very well done. Mine is just a different perspective using a different style of Gamaschen, which might give you a better idea as to how to put on that style versus the basic style that the British used. Okay, so this might be a little bit loud, unfortunately due to the lapel, but here we go. So I'm only going to do one as an example, as once you know how to do one, you can pretty much do both of them. And I think taking it apart is also pretty important to know. So here's the basic wrap of Gamaschen here. Nothing too special. So here we have, they're from Nestov. Link to these will be in the description. All right, so once you have your Gamaschen all ready to go, you're basically just going to take it, start right above the boot itself. These are not my actual low boots. These are stand-ins because they're easier to take on and off, and I'm not doing any reenactment, so it's just easier for me to wear these. But they're pretty similar in terms of how they work. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and put it right here, and you're just going to keep it tight as you wrap it around. You're going to want to do one full wrap, and then take it down lower. And I think I started this off wrong. Basically, you just want to cover your trousers completely. Keep your trousers protected. That's what these are for. You want to make sure you ruin the puttees, not the trousers, when you get wet and stuff. Puttees were built to, Puttees, Gamaschen, tomato, tomato. They were built to basically protect the trousers from conditions that were less than ideal, protect it from things like the mud and whatnot. You want to make sure that you're doing it this way so that the tip will be pointing outward rather than inward. So doing it in this direction is most important. You just want to make sure that you keep it tight. If you have a loose wrap, it's going to unravel. And there we go. Then you just take this, once you have it done, and this isn't perfect. I mean, I could probably get these last wraps a little better, have it at just a better angle, a little bit tighter, and then there we go. And then you just take that little thing there, and you wrap it around, and then you're just going to basically wrap it in on itself to keep it nice and tight. If it feels a little snug, that's good. You don't want to cut your circulation, but at the same time, you don't want these things falling down on you while you're running around in battle. And there you go. That's how you put on puttees. Once you get the basics down, you can start to get better at it. The main critical points are making sure you cover the top of the boot so nothing gets into your boot. The second thing you want to do is cover up your trousers. I made a mistake, and there's a small bit sort of exposed here. The other thing you want to do is make sure that the tip of it, the very tip of it, the arrow pointing outward, and I'll show you what that looks like because it's the back of my leg, is pointing outward that way, not inward. And you want both of them to be pointing outward, so the one on this leg would be pointing that way as well. You just want to make sure you have a tight wrap that isn't too tight but is comfortable and will stay in position and stay in place. And yeah, that's effectively how you're going to do it. That's how you're going to wrap your Gamaschen. And of course, I haven't done it in a while due to there not being a lot of events right now because of the COVID stuff is going on and has made it a lot more difficult to get together with people. So yeah. So basically, when you take it off, and again, I put these on slightly wrong, so they're not perfect. But again, once you get the basics down, you're going to get better and better and better if you just practice. And I just haven't put the time into practicing with these things because I don't like them. I prefer Martian Tiefel, although it is slightly less accurate. So yeah, taking these off can be a pain just due to the nature of it. So these ones, it has a function that I haven't really utilized very much, and it has this like little hook thing on the bottom here, the Gamaschen. I don't really utilize it too much. These are nest ofs, and I guess that's when you put it here and you wrap it around, you can stick it on the hook and then wrap down around it so that it doesn't fall down as much. I haven't utilized it. I don't really know if it's very useful. But to wrap them up, this is the arrow I was talking about. You want to make sure that the arrow is pointing outward like that and not inward. So you'll notice that on this side you have this line here with the strap, and then on this side it's smooth. You want this side facing your leg. So to do that, you want to understand that it's going to unwrap like that. So when you wrap it up, you want this to be pointed outward. Reverse of what you're going to want the end result to look like. And then once you have that like that, you then just start rolling it like so, keeping the strap outside of it. And you can make a tight wrap, you can make a smooth wrap, it doesn't really matter. You just want to roll it up. And make sure that it's nicely done for storage reasons. That way you can pack it in your tornister while you're marching if you also have Martian Tiefel, or you can just store it because you're going on leave and you don't need this because, well, you're not in the trenches, you're not advancing, you're just in a random French town drinking wine. So, once you have it all wrapped up, you're going to notice that this is all twisted. So you just kind of take your fingers like so and you just work towards untwisting it. You don't have to get it perfect, but it is good to have it untwisted just so that it doesn't look bad and you don't get this weird memory in the fabric. Anyway, so once you have all that done, then you can take this and just wrap it around here, keeping it tight, and then just stuff that in once underneath, and there you go. Now you have wrapped up Gamaschen that are ready for storage, and now you know how to put them on your legs for better reenactment and better use. I hope this has been helpful. Saturday, I will have the full assembly of how to wear your kit, and it shouldn't be too long as I've already covered all this stuff. I will be wearing my Martian Tiefel and not the Gamaschen, but I figured that this would be helpful for those of you who don't have Martian Tiefel, as they are more expensive than the low boots, for the same reason that it was historically. The Martian Tiefel use more leather and, in some cases, take more time to make. So, I hope this has been helpful. I'll see you guys in the next one, hopefully on Saturday.